A year after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, there are two main critics of President Biden's decision to pull out. One group argues that the United States is much less safe as a consequence of the American withdrawal. They tend to point to the fact that Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda, was found earlier this year living in Kabul and then obviously eliminated in a strike on July 31st. But the fact of the matter is there are very few al-Qaeda or ISIS, for that matter, in Afghanistan right now. And even if they do reconstitute themselves over time, the threat that they're going to be able to pose to the United States and to American citizens especially is far, far less than it would have been a decade ago, thanks to the many other counterterrorism measures that America has put in place. So for me, the marginal gain that we would have achieved from reducing that small number of al-Qaeda and ISIS forces in Afghanistan to a lower level is hardly worth continuing a war that had no end in sight, that cost the United States $2 trillion, consistently risked American lives, and ate up the time and the energy of the senior-most U.S. national security officials. Now we can put those resources where they're really needed for the threats of the future, especially in dealing with the challenges posed by countries like Russia and, above all, China. A second group of critics argue that the decision to withdraw was the right decision, but that it was poorly implemented. There's no question that the original U.S. plan, which was to leave a significant U.S. diplomatic presence in Kabul to help Afghanistan through a transitional period, failed. This plan failed because the Afghan state, and especially the Afghan security forces, collapsed. So I think it's fair to put some blame on the U.S. intelligence community, which had predicted that the Afghan security forces would hold out far longer than they actually did against the Taliban. Of course, in the defense of the U.S. intel community, they'd been listening for many years to Pentagon reports about steady improvement in the capabilities of those security forces. So it's not surprising that their own assessment was somewhat inaccurate in the heat of battle. The fact of the matter is, however, the United States government pivoted remarkably after they realized that the Afghan state was collapsing and conducted history's most successful non-combatant evacuation operation, an airlift that pulled some 120,000 people out of Afghanistan. In the process, the U.S. lost very few lives at a time when thousands of people back home were dying of COVID. These kinds of tough decisions, like the one that President Biden made on Afghanistan, are going to be needed much more frequently as we look ahead into the future, which will be characterized by more and more great power competition. We need to be sure that we put our resources, which are limited, into those operations and those needs which will truly make American citizens more prosperous and more secure.